move onward now onto the third talk, and the title is The Dynamics of Social and Technological Change, COVID-19 and Online Learning at the University of Botswana, by Professor Motsomi Marobela. The floor is yours now.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ihab, and I also want to extend my great wishes to WASAD for organizing this conference, which is so important and timely. My presentation, as already stated by the chair, I'm looking at change on the surface, technological change, but also immersed with social change. So by way of introduction, I recognize the profound impact of the coronavirus pandemic on humanity, on life, on work, and on education, especially at our level at higher education, where it has caused dysfunctionality, it has paralyzed education. But I also recognize that it is a great moment because it offers us the opportunities to reinvent and to innovate. Hence, the narrative, we have to move from the normal to the new normal, which is essentially the digital revolution. So I want now to get to my methodology. I come from critical theory. Specifically, I'm using critical realism philosophy of science. Realism essentially, it's fairly new philosophy, but it is gaining quite attention. Essentially, it is saying reality exists independent of our knowledge. So we can discover tomorrow a new planet and we didn't know about it. But I think its major strength is to offer us different levels of understanding phenomena, which is stratification. It gives us an overlap at different levels, from the experiences which we normally see in empirical investigation, down to the level of the actual, where we observe events, and some of the events we don't observe. And the next level is the real or the deep, the level where really we have causal structures and mechanisms that give rise to what we see at the empirical level. And in that multi-layered perspective, we are able, for example, to understand the history and sociology of the pandemic, from basic history, how it's unfolded. I will argue that the coronavirus pandemic is not natural. It is a result of us human beings, our interface with nature, and our motive to accumulate and exploit and do things like, for example, factory farming, where we keep animals and ultimately they give us problems. But also from the context of the politics of education, how education is mediated, how it's funded, relating also this to the economic sphere. For example, we are in an economic crisis. We could not get, for example, some of the things that we want to do online learning, some of the things we want to do to get medication. There's the level of governance and so forth. So that context for me is very important. And I relate that context to the conceptual framework, which is the socio-technical framework, where we see an organization as a holistic system, a dynamic system, a dialectical system, which have different components, and those components are related and are interdependent. So, for example, when we try to introduce online learning, it's not just the question of bringing technology. We are changing work, we are changing culture, we are changing and affecting people. And so with that kind of interconnectedness, we can understand that change also is very sensitive. It brings some kind of uncertainty and to a level resistance. So coming down to the case study of the University of Botswana, I've used case study and to use it to show its specific characteristics in terms of its attempt to introduce online learning. The University of Botswana, like other universities, has been disrupted to the extent that actually at some point we have to close. But over time, the university has been growing and actually investing in resources, notably physical infrastructure. But part of that physical infrastructure was technological. For example, they have a whole building which is housing experts in technology, and it has been used for training staff, faculty, to use new technologies. For example, we have had ASAS, we have had ERP, we have had Moodle, but all this changed when the coronavirus hit us. Then the previous training was geared actually using face-to-face training, but with coronavirus, then we are in a crisis. The university started now to consider options of intervening, and it was much more uncoordinated, as you'd expect the crisis. At one point, they were using blue jeans. At another level, individuals were using Zoom, and later on, Microsoft Teams. I think the university has laid a very good foundation for starting this, but they face a number of challenges. And amongst them actually is just the issue of resources. The staff members do not have requisite resources. It followed that when the crisis came, you have to change also your tools. I understood a doctor from UN saying that it is maybe a question of just self-motivation. I think self-motivation is important, but it's not enough. The issue of resources is very central. When the university went into online learning and introduced its implementation, they said lecturers should borrow money from the university, get loans to buy laptops. The old desktop were not working at all. They don't have camera, they don't have microphone. So they said, you have to get loans, pay them in 3 months. And that caused quite some dissonance from staff because they couldn't understand why they should buy equipment for university use. But on the other hand, the university was right to say to students, we give you a data bundle so that you can access online learning from home. But even for students, sometimes it's very difficult to access internet. You need still resources. As the host was saying, in other parts of Africa, they don't have electricity. So that was one of the major hurdles, the staff. So if you don't give staff these resources, it's going to be very difficult. As I speak now, I'm using my own laptop from home. I'm using my own Wi-Fi from home. So one of the challenges was staff safety. I think the university is trying its best to protect its faculty and staff. But this is really a bit marginal because we don't have testing when you get to university entrance. I think scientific evidence has said mass testing, and one would expect universities to also test. The key thing is temperature, to get your temperature and to sanitize you. If you are around the normal temperature, you are in. But what happened is the next level. But even then, there are days when you get to the university, the temperature is not working, the instrument. So you pass in and you say, why can't I take temperature? Maybe the battery is not working for this. So you can see the level in which actually you can get staff to get infected. Other challenges that we have had is just participation and involvement of staff. I call that democratic participation. When you introduce new things also, you have to carry people with you because they have to own this change in the end. You know, if you have top-down communication and approach to change, ultimately ordinary lecturers, professors will see this as a management change, not their change. So it's very important to carry people around it. There are issues also of governance and structure. Change is not enough at a level of technology. Where we are now, we are in an environment which is really changing, and we need also to change our governance systems, our structure, so that they're agile and flexible and responsive to the new changes. I think the issue of personal protective equipment, I should re-emphasize it. In my humble view, it is the responsibility, though I take personal responsibility, but it is the responsibility of the employer to make sure that you provide the equipment, the resources, the laptops, but also the masks, but also the sanitizer should be freely available so that, you know, you don't get people infected around. I think the issue of transparency also is very important. It's related also to participation, that when there is an infection, for example, it's not enough to say, okay, we have had a case of infection here, we have fragmented the building, and it's okay. We have to provide full information. At the social science, in humanities, in education, we have a case, so that when lecturers go into the building, into class, they are sensitive and aware that we have had a case here. Even though tracing is going on, I'm open to the fact that possibly I might get infected. So overall, I will end by saying, well, the University of Botswana has laid a good basis for online learning and digital learning. But more needs to be done. We have challenges. Issues of motivation of staff are at the center of change. If people are not motivated, if people don't have requisite resources, it is very difficult ultimately to see the benefits of online learning and its impact on the university's mission of excellence, so to speak. So I will end here, and thank you very much, and take questions and comments.
Thank you very much, Professor Marobela, for such an insightful presentation. Very kind, well done. And good that you, although all these challenges, but you're still progressing, and the university is collaborating with the staff and students and running their program as much as they can. Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
So we open now the floor for question, please, and we have 3 minutes before we break.
Yeah, Dr. Ihab, there's a question from the social media. The question is simply saying, what these countries should do. I mean, they are struggling with electricity, internet in particular. What can we offer? They're asking us, but I don't know. I don't have the answer really.
Yeah.
But probably also Dr. Petro is now also on. The question is, what can they do? What is the solution? There is not evenly benefiting everyone. So they're saying to us, what can they do? Africans. I have just been in the chat with also Ula from Sudan. She said electricity is being cut from 6 o'clock. So they can't do anything. So, I mean, this is a question. I mean, I'm just telling you what has been in the social here.
Yeah. That's a true challenge. And if Professor Dimitriou can just highlight, and Professor Marobela as well.
Thank you, Chair. I didn't want to. I mean, I intervened as a spontaneous reaction to the last intervention, in the sense that the notion of motivation was mentioned, and it might look like a contradiction between the kind of motivation that was invoked by the distinguished speakers, last speaker, and the kind of motivation I mentioned. When I mentioned that the importance of the personal motivation, it's obviously I was addressing the privileged situation in which the United Nations staff is placed. So they have all the means available. They have everything they need. They have the connectivity and other things that allow them to use the e-learning platform for their continuous improvement of skills. So it's not the case. It's not the case for all the potential beneficiaries. There might be people highly motivated personally, but who are not in a position to take advantage of that technology. So I would see that this is where we should converge under the Agenda 2030. It is to expand the use of technology in the most remote areas and for the people in need. And then, of course, that will allow them to get access to that kind of learning. And we have already the example of mobile phones. It is, it is the most mobile, so to say, technology. It replaced amazingly the land phones network, which was improving very slowly, expanding very slowly. So I think at the end of the tunnel, there is some light, but of course we have to make an effort together. And this is where also the private sector partners should come in, because it is also in their advantage to expand to their market. So it might be a case of win-win situation if we converge this this interest of the learners, of the universities, of the private sector suppliers of the technology, and many others. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Professor Marobela would like to add something here regarding the challenge faced by some remote area in Botswana.
Yes, I think this is a big problem, but not all African countries are facing electricity crisis. There are some areas where power is on throughout, but in a number of areas, even when it's available, it's expensive. The same with data. But I think it's a question of priority, really. If our governments see education as a priority, they can begin to put more resources into education, because education really is the key to the future. And this digital revolution has started, and Africa should not lag behind. We have to still go back and say, we are still having developmental states in Africa, and therefore the role of government is central. Education is a right, not a privilege. yes, we can accommodate at private universities, but many of the parents cannot afford tuition. Government has to lead and fund education. There are other projects that have been started by governments in Africa that are basically self-saving, corruption. And this is where really I think a question of leadership also is very important, related to saying we want Africa also to be at the forefront of this change. It's not just technology, we need resources. And if we do that, we can begin to see young Africans developing applications that they can also use and to be used globally. We have to put money into education. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I can see Professor Joseph Natayi from Uganda would like to participate on this question time.
Thank you very much, Professor, and thanks to Professor Marobela from Botswana for the presentation he has made. Professor, you did say that you like critical realism very much, meaning that you really borrow a lot from the works of Basker, who believes that actually the real world is a little bit different from the observed world. And this has implications for the paper that you have been presenting, where you did say that you're going to look at the history and sociology of the pandemic. I expected to see critical realism in the sociology of the pandemic, so that we really get to understand exactly how the theoretical underpinnings that have been used in the past to explain pandemics versus the reality out there somehow differs. Unfortunately, I didn't get this. Maybe I missed it a little bit. Can you throw some light on this?
Yes, thank you. I don't think I said in this paper I delve on the sociology of the pandemic. I only gave an example to say, for example, with critical realism, you can actually go to the deeper level and using it to understand the history and sociology of the pandemic. And if you look at my literature review, which you will look later, you'll note that actually, I have in fact actually noted that on the surface, we might actually look at this disease as a natural phenomena, but it is not. It is a result of actually capitalist accumulation, which has started actually to intervene in nature, and in the process, you know, affected the food chain and all those issues, and then they come to health. So I think it is fair to say, no, I didn't say I'm using critical realism to give a sociology of this pandemic. But having said that, as you rightly say, following Basker, there are events that are observable on the surface. But with realism, we are in a position to provide causal explanation. What is the cause, for example? If we talk about the issues of challenges of finance, we cannot talk about the lack of funding education and online learning without looking at the current state of the economy and how this pandemic has affected the economy, to the extent that sometimes you don't have adequate resources. So that is, I think, issues that when you look to the context, you can relate these things. And so I feel government genuinely, they have no money because government is funding education, and I can see the state of the economy. I appreciate the questions, Professor. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So please remember, if we all help and do a little bit, it will make a big difference.